You think you love them. You think you choose them freely, that your heart beats for who they truly are, that your soul recognizes their soul in some cosmic dance of destiny and meaning. But you don't. You love your wound in their flesh. You love your unresolved father in their silence. You love your abandoned mother in their neediness. You love your rejected child in their desperate attempts to please you. You love your own suppressed rage in their explosive anger. Every relationship is a theater where you perform the same tragedy over and over until you recognize the actors wearing different faces, speaking different lines, but playing the same eternal roles written in the invisible script of your unconscious mind. The person beside you is not a person. They are your unconscious made visible, walking and breathing in human form. They are your childhood dressed in adult skin. They are your unfinished business wearing the mask of intimacy, romance, and connection. You call it love. You call it fate. You call it chemistry. You call it soulmate connection. Freud called it repetition compulsion. The unconscious drive to recreate familiar patterns of suffering, to seek resolution for ancient wounds through modern relationships. You are not choosing them. You are choosing your familiar suffering. You are choosing the wound that feels like home. You are choosing the pain that whispers in your ear. This is what love looks like. This is what you deserve. The tragedy is not that you suffer. The tragedy is that you mistake your suffering for love, your compulsion for choice, your pattern for destiny. From the moment you learn to walk, you learn to need in very specific, very particular ways that would shape every relationship for the rest of your life. You learned that love means waiting. Waiting for attention, for approval, for the crumbs of affection that fall from the table of those who hold power over your emotional survival. You learned that love means proving yourself worthy, earning what should be given freely, like sunlight or rain or the breath in your lungs. Your mother's distracted affection became your template for intimacy. Her conditional approval became your blueprint for connection. Her emotional unavailability became your definition of normal love. When she was present, it felt like a gift. When she was absent, it felt like your fault. Your father's emotional absence became your blueprint for trust. His silence became your expectation of masculine love. His distance became your understanding of strength. His inability to see you became your belief that you were invisible. You were 3 years old when you decided that love requires performance, that authenticity is too dangerous, that your real self, messy, needy, chaotic, wild, is too much for others to handle. You were 5 when you learned that attention must be earned through perfection, through being good, through suppressing the parts of yourself that made others uncomfortable. You were 7 when you discovered that your needs made others pull away, that your feelings were inconvenient interruptions to their lives, that your desires were selfish impositions on their time and energy. You were 10 when you realized that some parts of you would never be loved, so you learned to hide them so well that even you forgot they existed. So you buried them. You buried your authentic desires beneath layers of acceptable behavior. You buried your true self beneath the person others could tolerate, could approve of, could maybe even love if you performed well enough. Now 30 years later, you choose partners who make you perform the same dance of proving your worth, same exhausting choreography of earning love. You choose the emotionally unavailable because unavailability feels like love, distant, precious, requiring effort to obtain. You choose the critical because criticism feels like attention. At least they're looking at you, even if they don't like what they see. You choose the distant because distance feels like strength. They must be powerful if they can withstand your need. You choose chaos because chaos feels familiar, the drama, the uncertainty, the constant vigilance required to maintain connection. You choose suffering because suffering feels real. If it doesn't hurt, it can't be important. You choose partners who abandon you because abandonment was your first lesson in love. You choose partners who criticize you because criticism was how care was expressed in your family. You choose partners who are emotionally unavailable because emotional unavailability is the only form of love you learn to recognize. You think you're seeking love. but you're seeking recognition for the child who never felt truly seen, validation for the parts of yourself you learned to exile, resolution for the wound that never properly healed. Every fight you have is the same fight your parents had, or the fight they never had but should have. Every disappointment is the same disappointment you felt at 5 years old when promises were broken and needs went unmet. Every abandonment is the first abandonment, repeated in endless variations, like a song stuck on repeat. You are not relating to them. You are relating to your past, to ghosts wearing their face, to wounds using their voice, to fears speaking through their actions. Freud saw what others refused to see. That consciousness is just the tip of the iceberg floating in the vast, dark ocean of the unconscious mind. Beneath your rational choices, beneath your careful reasoning, beneath your adult logic and mature decision-making, there swims the eternal child, making decisions from wounds that never healed, needs that were never met, fears that were never soothed, desires that were never fulfilled. The unconscious doesn't age. It doesn't learn from experience. It doesn't evolve with wisdom or change with time. It simply repeats endlessly, tirelessly, seeking resolution in situations that mirror the original trauma, hoping against hope that this time the story will end differently, that this time love will triumph, that this time the wound will finally heal. This is the transference. This is the projection. This is the endless theater of unfinished business where every new person becomes a character in your oldest story, where every relationship becomes a stage for your most ancient drama. Your relationship is not between two conscious adults making free choices based on genuine compatibility and mutual growth. It is between your inner child and their inner child, playing out dramas written decades ago in the invisible script of early attachment and family dynamics. When you say you never listened to me, you are not speaking to them. You are speaking to the parent who dismissed your voice, who told you to be quiet, who never had time for your stories, who taught you that your words didn't matter. When you say, "You don't understand me," you are not addressing them. You are addressing the void where understanding should have been, the emptiness where empathy should have lived, the silence where validation should have thrived. When you feel rejected by their distraction, you are feeling the rejection of every time your mother was too busy, too tired, too overwhelmed to see you fully, to receive you completely, to love you unconditionally. When you feel controlled by their preferences, you are feeling the control of every authority figure who taught you that your desires were secondary, your needs were inconvenient, your autonomy was a threat to their security. Every emotion you feel toward them is an emotion you felt toward someone else, someone who shaped you before you knew you were being shaped, before you had words for what was happening to your tender, open, vulnerable heart. The unconscious seeks what is familiar, not what is healthy. It seeks what matches its internal map of reality, not what serves your growth, your happiness, your authentic expression. It would rather choose familiar misery than unfamiliar joy, known suffering than unknown peace, predictable chaos than unpredictable harmony. This is why you find yourself in the same relationships over and over, with different people but the same dynamics, different faces but the same stories, different names but the same wounds being activated, the same needs going unmet, the same patterns playing out with devastating consistency. But what if you could love from abundance instead of deficit? What if you could choose from consciousness instead of compulsion? What if you could relate from wholeness instead of woundedness? There is a different kind of love, a love that doesn't seek to heal old wounds, but flows from an already healed heart, like water from a spring that never runs dry, like light from a sun that never sets. This love doesn't need. It gives because it overflows, because withholding would be more painful than giving, because generosity is its natural state. This love doesn't cling. It flows like a river that knows its destination, like wind that moves freely through the world, touching everything without possessing anything. This love doesn't project. It sees with clear eyes, unclouded by the ghosts of the past, unfiltered by the wounds of yesterday, undistorted by the fears of tomorrow. This love doesn't demand completion from another. It arrives complete, whole, integrated, ready to share, rather than take, to give rather than receive, to create rather than repair. When you have faced your unconscious patterns with unflinching honesty, when you have befriended your inner conflicts with compassionate understanding, when you have made peace with your unfinished business through conscious work, then you can love freely, without agenda, without the desperate need to fix or be fixed. You love them not because they fill your emptiness, but because your fullness seeks expression in the world, because love is what you are, rather than what you need, because giving love is as natural as breathing. You choose them not because they match your wounds and trigger your familiar patterns, but because they match your growth, your vision, your authentic self, your highest possibility. You see them not through the lens of your past, distorted by old hurts and ancient fears, but through the clarity of your present awareness, unclouded by projection and transference, undimmed by the shadows of yesterday. This is conscious love, love that arises from integration, not fragmentation, love that serves the relationship, not the neurosis, love that creates new possibilities rather than repeating old patterns. When you know your patterns, you can choose beyond them. When you understand your projections, you can withdraw them like fishing lines from the water. When you recognize your repetitions, you can break free from the cycle that has imprisoned you for decades. The mirror becomes transparent instead of distorting. The theater becomes authentic instead of performed. The performance becomes presence. The wound becomes wisdom. The pattern becomes choice. You stop needing them to be your mother, your father, your missing piece, your salvation, your completion. You allow them to be themselves, flawed, human, limited, but real. And in that space of allowing, in that freedom from projection, in that release from the demand that they heal your wounds and fulfill your unmet needs, something miraculous happens. Actual love becomes possible. But even this conscious love must know its limits. Even the most integrated relationship must face the truth of impermanence that governs all forms in this transient world. Every connection is temporary. Every bond will dissolve. Every love story ends in separation, if not in life, then in death. If not in death, then in the endless transformations that make today's person tomorrow's memory. This is not tragedy. This is liberation from the illusion of permanence that creates so much suffering, so much grasping, so much desperate clinging to what cannot be held. When you truly know that all relationships are temporary forms in the eternal dance of consciousness, you hold them lightly, like water cupped in your open hands, like light filtering through your fingers. You love fully without grasping desperately. You give completely without expecting permanence. You receive gratefully without demanding forever. You participate wholeheartedly without needing to possess. Sometimes the most loving act is withdrawal. Sometimes the deepest intimacy is solitude. Sometimes the relationship must die for the individuals to be reborn into their next evolution. Sometimes love means staying. Sometimes love means leaving. Sometimes love means fighting. Sometimes love means surrendering. The mature heart knows the difference. In silence, away from the mirror of the other, you meet yourself without projection, without performance, without the need to be anything other than what you are in your raw, unadorned authenticity. In aloneness, you discover what remains when all external validation is removed, when all the roles are stripped away, when you are left with just the naked truth of your being, unmediated by anyone else's perception or needs. In stillness, you find the source of love that doesn't depend on being loved back, the wellspring of affection that flows regardless of reciprocation, the fountain of care that springs from your own fullness rather than your emptiness. The wise lover knows when to engage and when to retreat. The mature heart knows that sometimes love means letting go. The integrated soul knows that the deepest relationship is with the mystery within, the eternal presence that witnesses all relationships but is touched by none. Even consciousness must sometimes rest in unconsciousness. Even the awakened must sometimes sleep. Even the sun must set to rise again. Even love must sometimes withdraw into silence to remember its source. There is a season for coming together and a season for moving apart. There is a time for intimacy and a time for solitude. There is a rhythm to love that cannot be forced, only followed. Look in the mirror of your relationships. Look without flinching, without blame, without the desperate need to be right or justified or vindicated. See your patterns with the clear eyes of someone ready to be free. Recognize your repetitions with the courage of someone willing to change. Own your projections with the honesty of someone prepared to grow. Stop blaming them for reflecting what you refuse to heal. Stop demanding that they fix what only you can repair. Stop expecting them to give you what you never learned to give yourself. If you're ready to love consciously instead of compulsively, if you're ready to choose instead of repeat, if you're ready to create instead of react, write this commitment. I take responsibility for what I bring to every relationship. Write it not as a burden that weighs you down, but as a liberation that sets you free. Write it as the first step toward authentic love. Write it as a declaration of your readiness to grow beyond your wounds, to evolve beyond your patterns, to transform your relationships from unconscious repetitions into conscious creations. The unconscious remains unconscious until you make it conscious through honest self-examination. The pattern remains unbroken until you break it with awareness and deliberate choice. The child remains wounded until you heal it with understanding, compassion, and reparenting. Your relationships are waiting, not for the perfect partner who will magically heal all your wounds and fulfill all your needs, but for the conscious you. Not for someone to complete you, but for you to arrive complete, whole, integrated, ready to love rather than need. The mirror is patient. It will reflect whatever you bring to it, without judgment, without resistance, without preference. Bring consciousness. Bring integration. Bring the love that overflows from your own completeness, rather than the need that seeks to fill your emptiness. This is the difference between love as compulsion and love as choice. This is the difference between relating from wounds and relating from wholeness. This is the difference between being a victim of your unconscious patterns and being the master of your conscious responses. The mirror never lies, but it can reflect truth instead of illusion, consciousness instead of compulsion, love instead of need, presence instead of pattern, choice instead of repetition. Your next relationship begins with your relationship to yourself. Make it conscious. Make it whole. Make it real. Make it a love story worth living.